If you look at a map of the Ottoman Empire in the year 1800, it looks indestructible. From the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia, from the Balkans to Baghdad, it is one of the largest empires on earth. And yet, less than a century later, it is drowning in debt, not defeated in battle, not conquered by armies, bankrupted, quietly. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire is usually blamed on corruption, decadence, or military weakness. But those explanations miss the real cause, because the empire did not fall first on the battlefield. It fell at the negotiating table. This story begins not with cannons, but with a trade agreement. In the early 19th century, Europe is changing fast. Factories are exploding across Britain. Textiles, machinery, cheap manufactured goods. The Ottomans, by contrast, still rely on traditional production, handcrafts. Local guilds protected internal markets. For centuries, this system worked, until Britain arrived with steam-powered industry. In 1838, the Ottoman Empire signs what looks like a harmless trade deal with Britain. It is called the Treaty of Balta-Liman. At the time, Ottoman officials believe they are modernizing, opening trade, encouraging growth, strengthening diplomatic ties. What they don't realize is that they have just surrendered control of their economy. The treaty does three critical things, and every one of them is fatal. First, it abolishes Ottoman trade monopolies. For centuries, the empire controlled key industries internally. Now those protections vanish overnight. Second, it locks import tariffs at extremely low levels. British goods flood Ottoman markets cheaply, endlessly. Local producers cannot compete. Third, and most dangerous, it prevents the Ottomans from raising tariffs in the future. Even if the economy collapses, even if industries die, even if revenue disappears, this is not free trade. This is economic disarmament. British merchants celebrate. Ottoman craftsmen begin to vanish. Entire industries collapse within a generation. Textiles, metalwork, shipbuilding. The empire's tax base begins to shrink, but its expenses do not. The Ottomans still have an army, a bureaucracy, infrastructure to maintain. They need money. And now they can no longer raise it internally, so they do the only thing left: they borrow. At first, Ottoman borrowing feels manageable. Small loans, emergency financing, mostly from European banks in London and Paris. But borrowing is addictive when revenue is collapsing, and the Ottoman Empire is now trapped. Its domestic industries are dying. Customs revenue is capped by treaty. Tax collection weakens. Yet Europe keeps offering loans, not because Europe wants to help, because Europe wants leverage. By the 1850s, Ottoman debt is exploding. Loans are taken to pay old loans, interest compounds, and the terms worsen every time. European financiers begin attaching conditions: control over customs, oversight of budgets, foreign supervision of finances. The empire is still sovereign in name, but its economy is no longer its own. Then comes the Crimean War, another catastrophe. The Ottomans fight alongside Britain and France. But they pay for the war by borrowing even more from the same powers supposedly defending them. By the end of the conflict, the empire is bleeding financially. By 1875, the truth can no longer be hidden. The Ottoman Empire defaults. It cannot pay its debts. Europe responds instantly, not with invasion, with administration. In 1881, European creditors create the Ottoman Public Debt Administration. This is the turning point. Foreign officials now control Ottoman tax collection, customs revenue, salt, tobacco, and alcohol monopolies. The most reliable sources of income are no longer Ottoman. They belong to creditors. The empire still exists. The Sultan still rules, but the money flows outward. This is how the Ottomans are defeated. Not by soldiers, by contracts. And the worst part, there is no escape clause. The trade treaty cannot be undone. The debt cannot be paid off. The system feeds on itself. By the time the empire enters the 20th century, it is already financially hollow. World War I does not destroy it. It merely finishes what the accountants started. By the 1870s, the Ottoman Empire is no longer pretending everything is fine. The numbers don't lie. Revenue is collapsing, debt payments are exploding, and every reform makes things worse. The empire has not been conquered, but it is running out of time. At first, the Ottomans try to fix the problem internally. They cut spending. They raise taxes where they can. They attempt modest reforms. None of it works. Because the core problem is not mismanagement, it is control. The treaty signed decades earlier still strangles the economy. Ottoman officials cannot raise tariffs to protect local industries. They cannot block cheap European imports. They cannot rebuild domestic production. Every attempt at recovery leaks money back to Europe, so the borrowing continues, loan after loan, each one more expensive than the last. European bankers understand the situation perfectly. They know the Ottomans are desperate, and desperation is profitable. Interest rates rise, fees multiply, loans are structured in ways that guarantee failure. Money is lent at face value but paid out at a discount. The empire receives less than promised, but must repay the full amount. By 1875, the inevitable happens. The Ottoman Empire defaults. It announces it cannot meet its debt obligations. This should have been the moment of renegotiation, a chance to reset. Instead, it becomes the moment the empire truly loses sovereignty. Europe does not panic. Europe does not threaten war. Europe does something far more devastating. It steps in to help. In 1881, European creditors impose a solution. They create an institution with a harmless-sounding name, the Ottoman Public Debt Administration. This is the real end of the empire. Even though no one realizes it yet, the administration is staffed not by Ottomans, but by representatives of Britain, France, Germany, Italy, and Austria, foreign officials, foreign accountants, foreign priorities. They do not advise the Ottoman government, they replace it financially. The administration takes control of the empire's most reliable sources of income: salt taxes, tobacco monopolies, customs revenues, alcohol duties. These revenues no longer flow into the Ottoman treasury, they go directly to European creditors. Before the Ottoman state sees a single coin, the Sultan still issues decrees, the empire still has borders, but its wallet is gone. This is not colonialism with flags and soldiers. This is colonialism by spreadsheet. Ottoman officials protest. They argue this arrangement humiliates the empire. They are told it is temporary, necessary for stability. But temporary arrangements have a habit of becoming permanent. Every year, more revenue is diverted. Every year, less money remains for infrastructure, education, or reform. The empire begins cutting deeper. Not because it wants to, because it has no choice. Railways are delayed, factories are never built. Local industries that might have competed are starved of investment. The empire is trapped in a vicious cycle. Low revenue right arrow, more borrowing right arrow, more foreign control right arrow, even lower revenue, and the most cruel irony. European newspapers describe this as financial discipline. They praise the efficiency of the debt administration. They call it modernization. For the Ottoman people, it feels like slow suffocation. Taxes are still collected, but nothing improves, because the money leaves before it can be used. By the time the 20th century approaches, the truth is undeniable. The Ottoman Empire is no longer an empire. It is a debtor state, alive, functioning, but hollow. World War I will be blamed for its collapse. But the war is just the final push. The empire was already financially dead, because the moment Europe took control of its revenue, the outcome was sealed. By the time the 20th century arrives, the Ottoman Empire is still standing, but it is no longer steering. On paper, the empire still controls vast territory. In reality, its economy is supervised by foreign creditors. Its revenue streams are intercepted before they reach the state. Its future is decided in European offices. This creates a dangerous paradox. The empire is responsible for stability, but they need the tools to achieve it. Ottoman leaders understand the trap. Reform requires money. Money requires control. Control has already been surrendered. Every attempt at modernization runs into the same wall. Build railways, no funds. Modernize the army, no funds. Invest in industry, no funds. The debt administration gets paid first. Always, this financial suffocation produces political desperation, and desperation changes decision-making. Within the Ottoman elite, a belief begins to spread that the system cannot be reformed from within, that no negotiation will return sovereignty, that the only way to break the grip of foreign creditors is to break the system itself. This belief does not emerge overnight, it grows quietly. In salons, in military academies, among reformist officers and young bureaucrats, they see what Europe has done, and they draw a dangerous conclusion. If peace guarantees debt, then conflict might offer escape. The logic is flawed. But it feels rational to those being strangled slowly. By the time the Young Turks rise to power, the situation is dire. They inherit an empire without money, without autonomy, without patience. They attempt reforms. They centralize power. They modernize institutions where possible, but the debt structure remains untouched, because touching it would provoke Europe instantly. Then Europe itself begins to fracture. Rival alliances form. Old powers prepare for war. And for the Ottomans, this looks like opportunity. If Europe is distracted, if war disrupts financial enforcement, if the global order breaks, then maybe the chains will loosen. This is the fatal gamble. The Ottoman decision to enter World War I is often portrayed as ideological, or naive, or reckless, but there is a quieter reason underneath. War suspends debt, war breaks contracts, war disrupts creditors. If the empire is going to die financially anyway, then war becomes a calculated risk. Joining the conflict is not about victory, it is about escape. When the Ottomans side with Germany, they are not choosing ideology. They are choosing the only power willing to challenge the existing financial order. It does not work. War drains what little remains. Supply collapses. Infrastructure crumbles. The army bleeds. And when the war ends, the empire is not freed from debt. It is dismantled. European powers carve it apart, not because of defeat alone, but because the empire is no longer economically viable. The final irony is brutal. The debt administration outlives the empire itself. Its mechanisms are studied, replicated, refined, because the lesson is clear. You do not need to conquer a country to control it. You only need to control its revenue. The Ottoman Empire did not fall because it was weak. It fell because it surrendered its economic weapons first. When the war ends, the Ottoman Empire is gone, not reformed, not rebuilt, gone. Its territories are divided, its institutions dismantled, its sovereignty erased, and the official story is simple. The empire was old, backward, weak. World War I finished what time had already begun, but this story leaves something out, something crucial. Empires do not usually collapse the moment they lose a war. They collapse when they lose the ability to recover. And the Ottomans lost that ability long before the first shot of World War I was fired. By the time the empire entered the war, its finances were already controlled by foreigners, its revenue already pledged to creditors, its future already mortgaged. Defeat merely revealed what had already happened. After the empire's collapse, the new states that emerge from its ruins inherit something worse than broken borders. They inherit debt structures, customs systems designed for extraction, tax regimes built to service foreign obligations, economies shaped around dependency. The Ottoman public debt administration becomes a template, a proof of concept. European powers study it closely because it achieved something remarkable. It neutralized a sovereign state without firing a shot. No occupation required, no rebellion triggered, no international outrage, just contracts. In the decades that follow, the same logic appears again and again. In Egypt, in Persia, in Latin America, debt first, oversight second, control without conquest. By the mid-20th century, this system is formalized, given new names. International institutions, stabilization programs, conditional lending. The language changes, the mechanism does not. The Ottoman Empire is remembered as a military failure, but its real defeat happened earlier, when it surrendered the right to protect its own economy. That is the lesson buried in this story. Empires do not fall when their armies lose. They fall when their balance sheets are no longer theirs. The Treaty of Balta Liman was not just a trade deal. It was the moment the empire agreed to compete without armor. The loans were not assistance, they were leverage. And the debt administration was not reform, it was replacement. By the time the Ottomans realized what had happened, escape was impossible. They could not raise tariffs, they could not control revenue, they could not finance reform. Every path forward led back to Europe. War did not cause the collapse. It only removed the illusion of choice. Today, when we look at modern states struggling under debt, when we hear words like restructuring, conditionality, fiscal discipline, we are hearing echoes of this story. The Ottoman Empire was not conquered by cannons, it was bankrupted by clauses.